Hello everyone, and welcome to this video where we are continuing on with the modular engine generator. This time we're taking a look at why it's overheating. We're going to be diagnosing different aspects of the builds. We're going to be seeing if adding different radiators and different things can potentially help out, and what will be the final verdict for the locomotive that I'm working on. I've built 3 identical 5-cylinder generator setups using the exact same control panel, which is here. All of them are going to have identical values coming out of the setup right now, out of the generator and the RPS, and you can see the temperatures up there. So I'm going to modify the cooling on these setups and see which is the optimal cooling setup that I could use in my locomotive, because in that video it ended up overheating, and that is no good. Now there's all kind of information out there when people get to talking, and some people will say that it is more optimal if, instead of having big pumps that circulate a lot through the radiator, you're better off using a smaller pump that will slowly cycle through the radiator, therefore letting that coolant cool off better rather than quickly kind of go through it and pass. So I'm going to connect a single pump to each of these radiators first. This is quite reminiscent of the tests I did for the pre-built large engine, but anyway, here we have dual large pumps. On this case we have a single regular pump, and over here we have dual regular pumps. So firing this system up, putting on this, we can now step back and watch the coolant. I took an arbitrary pause just to kind of see where we're at. So over here we're at 28.11, here we're 28.27, and here we're at 27. So this is the most cool, or the best operating system. You could see that as those ones are hitting 30, this one still hasn't at 30. Now that is just a minuscule difference. Really, it doesn't change the fact that the engine's still heating up very fast, but between these setups, this one does appear to give slightly better results. We're almost 1 degree less here than we are in this case right there. The problem with this case is the fact that this is the one that was overheating, so with 2 pumps and 2 radiators. So what I've done is added a case here that has 3 radiators, and then over here, instead of having 2 radiators, or rather 2 coolant manifolds on this first case over there with 2 radiators, on this one we've added 2 radiators in sequence with the path. So if that doesn't make sense, what I've done is here it's going to go through this pump into this first radiator, out of the first radiator into the second radiator, and out here through this pump. So there's 2 of those. So we'll see which of these 3 works best. Running this setup here for a little bit, you can see, if we take a little snapshot of this, that the most efficient out of all these systems is in fact the one with the radiators running in sequence. Second is the one that has 3 radiators, and then of course the one that has 2 being the worst out of these in combinations here. Now I can let it play out, but we do know that this one here does overheat. Now one thing to keep in mind with this setup is we're running it at a constant RPS out of this engine and a constant air-fuel ratio. Now changing the air-fuel ratio may change the results of the cooling, so it may be that having this very low having this low air-fuel ratio of 13 rather than 14 does contribute to increased heating. Another theory that I saw someone mentioning is that instead of RPS on these modular engines, the throttle on the fuel manifold is what causes excess heat. Someone else was saying that it could be the air manifold. So here you could see that it's wide open at 1. So it could be that turning down the throttle could actually help us out when it comes to the cooling. But here you could see this is quite clear. These two right cases are pretty similar, the left one being now several degrees higher. So in this test, it's clear that having 3 radiators is better than 2, which is, you know, common sense. Now this one is a bit wacky, and there are 4 radiators in total, so I'd think instead of this case, it would be better just to have 4 pure radiators plugged in with the coolant manifolds rather than this thing that we're getting here. But you could see something interesting. Here we have 200 liters per second going through these radiators, whereas if we make our way over here, we're getting 250. For this test, I've given each engine a different air-fuel ratio. So we have 13 over here, we got 13.5 here, and we got 14 here. Otherwise, we have the exact same throttle, we got the exact same clutch power, and you can see, as we kind of discussed in the previous video, here we're at 1200, here we're at 11.9, and here we're at 1100 flat. So the different air-fuel ratio does affect the power that's coming out, but you could also see there is a difference with the cooling from these different engines. So it does increase as you go down to the lower air-fuel ratio. So here we're almost 1.5 more than what we are on the one that is at 14 air-fuel ratio. So what I could almost imagine it as is like, you know, pushing that engine to the max. So here in this case, you're really pushing it, whereas over here that's kind of a steady, happy state. So if we go look at the efficiency here, we're kind of hovering at 93. Over here we're at 92.5, and over here I'd imagine less, so we're at 90 on this one. So that efficiency isn't talking about the power efficiency, it's talking about probably fuel efficiency, or, you know, the efficiency of how that engine runs rather than the power that it is outputting. So this is a high output engine versus this is a detuned low output engine, and you can see from the more than 100 Stormworks watts difference in power coming out between them. But likewise, it is increasing at a slower rate in temperature than this one as well. As expected, the temperature still is increasing. Of course, the high efficiency or high power one is almost at 60 degrees, whereas our low efficient or high output, low output. So high output 60, low output we're at 55. So there's a 5-degree difference at right now. And then this mid-range one, which is honestly not bad because it has just 45 less Stormworks. I mean, it is pretty much halfway, but anyway, that one is right smack dab in the middle of the two of them. But the problem is the temperature is still increasing, so this doesn't really speak for the long-term reliability of these engines. As long as the temperature is increasing, this is not something that we could use in the locomotive for long distances. A little while later, it seems that they've stabilized a little. They're still climbing ever so slowly, this one being at 75, 71, and 67. Now, while if I set my cutoff to which it starts the overheating protection and drops the throttle, if I set it at 100 Celsius, maybe this will never reach it. Right now I have it set to 80 because I was playing it real safe, so maybe this would last up until that point, so this is for sure going to be the new system I implement in my locomotive. That said, I came across this really interesting article by Grumpy Old Man, and it pretty much explains some of the differences in radiator setups after the Space DLC. So you could see before the Space DLC, it goes into a huge explanation with description and everything, including graphs and charts and things. So that's really cool to know. There is a little updated bit that says something interesting. It says that you can now use coolant tanks to push the coolant flow rate above 350 liters a second. So if you remember, we were getting around 250. So I'm very interested to know if we add these on the input pump here, we can get a higher flow rate and thus not reach that high level of temperature. The article said that it has to be on this side of the system, so it won't work if it is on the outlet side. It has to be on the inlet side, and we're going to go ahead and put on this system here the tank. The video said to use a medium tank, so we're going to put that here, and for this we'll put Freshwater. We'll see if that is okay. And then on this other case, in the medium example here, let's do the same thing, but for the sake of argument, let's put seawater and see what result that yields us. We will go ahead and connect the air-fuel ratio so it is the same, because we want to compare apples to apples, and that should be everything we need for this test to run. So I have these tanks installed, and this one here does not have tanks. The middle one is using seawater, and that one over there is using freshwater. Now, being an engineer, I don't take anything written for its word. I have to do experiments myself. So what I will have to do a little bit later is also test to see why it has to be on the inlet side. What happens if we put it on the outlet side? But right now we're running the test, and you can see, if we do a little snapshot pause here, these two are the same. This one is slightly higher, so not enough that I would definitely think something is, you know, making a difference at this early stage of the game. But we'll see as this experiment runs a little longer what kind of results we get. But for the sake of completion, I will show you here we're getting 330. For this one here, we'll be getting the same 330, 327, a little less. And then over here, we're getting 250 liters per second. So for sure, it seems the freshwater case is doing the best. Even if we take another snapshot here, you could see it's slightly less than this one, just for that reason of the different flow rate. Whereas here now, it's getting to be higher, so for sure it's going to compound itself as the number increases. The difference between the one with the tank and the one without the tank is going to grow. So because we determined that the saltwater case was slightly worse, I just went back to using freshwater, and I actually moved this tank to be on this side of the pump. So now they're two different sides. Over here we have it on the input side, and over here we have it on the output side. And something quite interesting actually happened with that is if I go over here, we're still getting that 330 liters per second, whereas over here we're actually getting 380. So it seems that putting it on the output side was in fact better, and you can see here by a number snapshot that it is slightly less. So we'll leave this test for some time, and I'll come back and see what the results are. One thing I didn't mention is inside the generator controller, I actually removed the overheating safety. So all of these engines are going to go until either they reach equilibrium and stop increasing in temperature, or until they start on fire. So we will see when that happens, but right now there is no safety for the overheating. Checking in roughly 10 minutes after we started the test, and you can see here just the difference in temperature with the different setups of the coolant tanks. So in this case, it is 5 less than one without the coolant tanks, which is a decent amount if you consider the fact that the engines are otherwise identical. Now, one interesting thing to note is we are getting 2 watts of different power between these instances, which might be due to, I don't know, the strain of the system or the speed of the something going through there or not, but kind of weird, but not a whole lot of difference. it appears we're almost at 80 degrees on the one with no coolant tank, but you could see now it's slowed down. I mean, it still is increasing, which leads me to wanting to just run this for an hour if needed until it hits that equilibrium point. But because they have kind of... Oh, they're all tuning down now. Did we run out of fuel? No, we didn't. Something happened, and something happened at the same time to all of them. Interesting. And that was just as that one was hitting 80. One thing that may be causing that problem, and we'll see in the next test, is that the pressure inside these was so low because we didn't have sort of a bleeder valve to fill up the pressure. So it ended up becoming a very, very low pressure situation, and potentially these could no longer accept any more fuel. Now that's the only thing I could kind of think of that would be causing this, except for the fact that they happened at the same time, which would lead me to believe it's microcontroller related. But if you see here in all the preset engines, they seem to put this gas valve with a release. So that may be what is needed and what is causing this glitch otherwise. So we'll go back to our own situation here and just add that onto this sort of system here. So I've added it to all of the systems now. For the gas tanks, we'll see if that does anything. Otherwise, I can't see anything in the microcontroller that's causing it because I disconnected the temperature output, which does these safeties. So there is no need for the microcontroller to kick it out. And anyways, I have here 85, whereas we noticed that happening at 80 degrees. So that could have just been a fluke. Anyways, I'm going to run this and see what happens. We're back at it, and now you can see that the engines are going, the temperature is increasing, the Stormworks watts that are displayed here are more or less matching, and that may have been the reason for the difference. It may have been that the fuel was not able to get into the system fast enough, causing a discrepancy between the systems. Now you could see it is evenly matched more or less, and as this one goes up, the rest of them do go up. What's interesting is this port is moving steadily, so as the fuel gets consumed, this does go into there, so you can see the pressures on these tanks are not dropping like crazy. They're kind of trying to stabilize, whereas if you go back to the part of my video where the engine stalled out, it had like a tank pressure of like 0.00 something. So you could see here it's kind of doing its part and stabilizing as much as it can, and we'll now monitor these and see exactly what happens. And it seems we've hit that equilibrium. I am so happy, and it seems that my designs had a major flaw because I never had this fluid port end on the fluid tanks. That was before the space update, and I just kept all my vehicles like that. So I can imagine now my engines on my cars and my helicopters or any of my pre-made tanks have to start getting this thing added. So that is super important to note. In other news here, you could see the temperature is actually dropping. So we are able to successfully have a temperature that is steady at around 73 when we are using this system with the tank on the outlet side. But for space saving and stuff, I may even just stick with this setup because it still is working, and you can see it's even dropping. So here's our equilibrium rates for this setup. I'm going to make sure I take a screenshot of this because this is now going to be my benchmark test for what I'm trying to run as far as these generators go. This yielded some excellent results. I'm actually very happy to start to build the locomotive based on these tests, and also other creations. I may start to build diesel electric ships as well that use this system if I'm happy with how it turns out. But overall, a very successful test. I'm feeling motivated, feeling good, especially after my little bit of burnout that I experienced with all the pressure on the locomotive. Now I'm back to normal. This is truly awesome. I'm very happy with the results. Hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more content, stay tuned for more creations, and as always, happy Stormworksing, everyone.